Ava's car glided through the empty streets of Linwood on a cold November night. The sky was a deep indigo, scattered with stars, as the streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. She drove with Emma, her best friend since middle school, sitting beside her. Their laughter echoed inside the car as they reminisced about their childhood adventures and shared dreams of the future. The clock on the dashboard read 11:43 p.m. They were returning from a late-night study session at the local library, a common ritual during exam season. Ava, a diligent and cautious driver, rarely sped or took risks. But that night, something was different. The conversation had taken a serious turn, veering into topics that weighed heavily on Ava's mind. "I just don't know if I can keep up with everything," Ava confessed, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The anxiety in her voice was palpable, a sharp contrast to her usual confident demeanor. "School, debate, student council, it's all too much." Emma turned to her, concern etched on her face. "You're doing amazing, Ava. Everyone thinks you're perfect." "Perfect," Ava repeated, her voice tinged with bitterness. "That's the problem. I can't afford to be anything less." The weight of her responsibilities pressed down on her, and she felt a surge of frustration. Her eyes momentarily shifted from the road to Emma, seeking reassurance. It was in that fleeting moment, that fraction of a second, that everything changed. A blinding light appeared in the distance, growing larger with each passing second. Ava's heart raced as she realized it was the headlights of an oncoming car. Panic surged through her veins, and she yanked the steering wheel to the right, desperately trying to avoid a collision. The tires screeched against the asphalt as the car swerved violently. Emma screamed, a sound that pierced through Ava's consciousness and seemed to stretch time itself. The world spun around them as the car skidded off the road, crashing through a wooden fence and coming to a jarring halt in a ditch. The deafening silence that followed was broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the labored breathing of the two girls. Ava's hands trembled as she struggled to process what had just happened. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear, guilt, and disbelief. She turned to Emma, who was slumped against the passenger seat, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "Oh my God, Emma. Are you okay?" Ava's voice cracked with panic as she fumbled for her phone to call for help. The cold air from the shattered windshield stung her skin, but she barely noticed. Emma groaned, her eyes fluttering open. "I think so," she muttered, her voice weak. "Just a little dizzy." Ava's hands were shaking so badly that it took her several tries to dial 911. When the operator answered, she struggled to explain their location and the extent of their injuries. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they waited for the ambulance to arrive, the reality of the accident sinking in with each passing second. The paramedics arrived swiftly, their flashing lights illuminating the scene. They worked quickly, assessing Emma's injuries and checking Ava for signs of shock. Ava watched in a daze as they carefully loaded Emma onto a stretcher, her mind replaying the accident over and over. As the ambulance pulled away, taking Emma to the hospital, Ava stood alone by the side of the road. The once familiar surroundings now felt alien and hostile. The broken fence, the crumpled front of her car, the dark stain of blood on the seat, each detail etched itself into her memory, a grim reminder of what had happened. the police arrived soon after, asking questions and taking statements. Ava answered mechanically, her mind numb. She was too overwhelmed to fully grasp the gravity of the situation, but one thing was clear: her life had changed in an instant. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits, insurance claims, and sleepless nights. Emma's injuries, though serious, were not life-threatening. She suffered a concussion, several broken ribs, and a fractured wrist. Ava's guilt, however, was immeasurable. She blamed herself for every bruise, every ache that Emma endured. The accident became a dark cloud that hung over her, a constant reminder of her failure to protect her friend. Ava's parents were supportive but stern. They understood the accident was a mistake, but they also emphasized the importance of learning from it. "You need to be more careful, Ava," her father said, his tone firm but not unkind. "One moment of distraction can change everything." His words echoed in her mind, adding to the weight of her guilt. Ava tried to throw herself back into her routine, hoping that the familiarity of school and activities would distract her from the lingering trauma. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the haunting memories of that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the headlights, heard Emma's scream, and felt the bone-jarring impact of the crash. Her friends and classmates noticed the change in her. Ava became quieter, more withdrawn. The once vibrant girl who led debates with passion and confidence now seemed distant, her laughter hollow, her smiles forced. The pressure to maintain her perfect image became even more unbearable as she struggled to cope with the aftermath of the accident. Ava's relationship with Emma also changed. Although Emma never blamed her, the accident created a rift between them. Ava couldn't shake the feeling that she had failed her best friend, and this guilt created an invisible barrier. Their conversations became strained, filled with awkward silences and unspoken words. In the months following the accident, Ava learned to mask her pain with a veneer of normalcy. She continued to excel academically, led the debate team to victories, and fulfilled her duties as student council president. But beneath the surface, she was a fractured soul, haunted by the guilt of the accident and the fear that she would never be able to mend the broken pieces of her life. The accident was just the beginning of Ava's journey into darkness, a journey that would reveal the cracks in her seemingly perfect life and expose the pressures and betrayals that would ultimately lead to her disappearance. Ava Mitchell was a paragon of excellence. Her days were an endless cycle of commitments, schoolwork, extracurriculars, and social responsibilities. The demands placed upon her were relentless, and the expectations, both self-imposed and external, grew heavier with each passing day. Beneath the surface of her polished exterior, Ava's life was unraveling, and the pressure to maintain her flawless image was taking a devastating toll. The accident had already left Ava emotionally scarred, but she attempted to bury her guilt and fear beneath layers of academic and social achievement. Her parents, both successful professionals, had always emphasized the importance of excellence. Failure, in any form, was simply not an option in the Mitchell household. Her mother, a prominent attorney, had a strict regimen for Ava's education and extracurriculars. Each morning began with a meticulously planned schedule taped to the refrigerator, outlining Ava's day down to the minute. Her father, a renowned surgeon, held high standards for discipline and perseverance. Their combined expectations created an environment where Ava felt she had to constantly prove her worth. "You're doing great, honey," her mother often said, her tone both encouraging and insistent. "But remember, colleges look at everything. Your grades, your leadership roles, your community involvement. You can't afford to slip up." Ava nodded, absorbing the pressure like a sponge. The need to excel became an obsession. She stayed up late into the night, her desk littered with textbooks, notebooks, and color-coded planners. Her room was a shrine to academic success, walls adorned with certificates, trophies, and ribbons that testified to her achievements, but the cost of this relentless pursuit of perfection was high. Ava's sleep became increasingly erratic, and her dreams, when she had them, were haunted by the accident. The faces of her parents, the disapproving looks of her teachers, and the whispers of her classmates formed a chorus of judgment that echoed in her mind. Each day felt like a balancing act on a tightrope stretched impossibly thin. Her teachers praised her diligence, her classmates envied her success, but no one saw the cracks forming beneath the surface. Ava's anxiety grew with each passing day, manifesting in stomach aches, headaches, and a constant feeling of being on edge. She began to question her own abilities, fearing that any moment of weakness would expose her as a fraud. The stress was compounded by the competitive atmosphere at Lincoln High School. Her peers, driven by similar pressures, viewed academic and extracurricular achievements as a zero-sum game. Friendships were often tinged with rivalry, and support was conditional. Ava felt the weight of this unspoken competition in every interaction, every conversation point. One day, during a particularly intense student council meeting, Ava felt the full force of this competitive environment. They were planning the upcoming winter formal, a major event that required meticulous organization and coordination. As the president, Ava was responsible for overseeing every detail, from decorations to ticket sales. "Is everything ready for the fundraiser next week?" Ava asked, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. "We need to raise at least $3,000 to cover the venue costs." Her fellow council members nodded, but the air was thick with tension. Jason, the treasurer, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "We've got everything in place, but we're cutting it close. I've been looking at the numbers, and we need to boost our ticket sales significantly." Ava's stomach tightened. "How much are we short?" "About $1,200, Jason replied, his tone grim. Ava's mind raced. The winter formal was her responsibility, and failure was not an option. "We'll increase our social media presence, push for more promotions during school announcements, and maybe even offer a raffle prize for early ticket buyers," she said, trying to project confidence. The meeting ended, and Ava retreated to her sanctuary in the library, where she often sought solace amid the rows of books. She opened her planner and began scribbling notes, outlining strategies to boost ticket sales and brainstorming ideas for the event. The pressure was suffocating, but she couldn't allow herself to falter. The fear of disappointing her parents, her peers, and herself drove her to work harder, pushing past the point of exhaustion. Her relationships with her friends began to suffer. She became increasingly irritable, snapping at those who tried to offer support or sympathy. Emma, still recovering from the accident, noticed the change in Ava and tried to reach out, but Ava's guilt and anxiety created a barrier she couldn't penetrate. "Hey, Ava," Emma said one afternoon, approaching her locker with a tentative smile. "You've seemed really stressed lately. Do you want to talk about it?" Ava forced a smile, her heart pounding. "I'm fine, Emma. Just a lot on my plate right now." Emma's eyes were filled with concern. "You know I'm here for you, right? You don't have to go through this alone." Ava nodded, but the words felt hollow. She didn't want to burden Emma, especially after the accident. The guilt she carried was a constant reminder of her perceived failure, and she didn't want to add to Emma's struggles. As the winter formal approached, Ava's anxiety intensified. The night before the event, she stayed up until dawn, making final adjustments to the event plans, double-checking the budget, and rehearsing her speech. Her hands trembled as she prepared, her mind racing with thoughts of potential disasters and last-minute crises. On the day of the formal, Ava was a whirlwind of activity, coordinating with vendors, supervising the setup, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. The event was a success, but Ava could barely enjoy it. She was too consumed by the fear of failure, the pressure to meet expectations, and the weight of her own self-imposed standards. As she stood in the dimly lit ballroom, watching her classmates dance and laugh, a wave of exhaustion washed over her. The satisfaction of pulling off the event was fleeting, overshadowed by the realization that this was just one hurdle among many. There would always be another challenge, another expectation to meet, another standard to uphold. Ava left the formal early, slipping out unnoticed and walking to her car in the chilly night air. She sat behind the wheel, staring blankly at the dashboard. The pressure had become a relentless force, driving her to the brink of collapse. She felt trapped in a cycle of achievement and anxiety, each success only heightening the fear of the next failure. The accident had been the catalyst, but it was the unyielding pressure that kept her teetering on the edge. Ava's perfectionism, fueled by the expectations of her parents, her peers, and herself, was a prison from which she couldn't escape. The facade she had built was cracking, and the weight of maintaining it was crushing her spirit. As Ava drove home that night, the lights of the city blurred through her tears. She felt a profound sense of isolation, the crushing loneliness of someone who was surrounded by people but utterly alone in her struggle. The pressure to be perfect had consumed her, leaving her a hollow shell of the girl she once was. The cafeteria at Lincoln High buzzed with the usual lunchtime chatter. Students gathered in clusters, exchanging gossip and laughter. Ava sat with her tray at a corner table, her mind preoccupied with the endless to-do list that seemed to define her life. Her sandwich lay untouched as she scrolled through her planner, adding yet another meeting to her already packed schedule. "Hey, Ava," a voice called out, snapping her from her reverie. It was Rachel, a classmate from her English class, who plopped down beside her with a broad smile. "Mind if I join you?" Ava glanced up, forcing a smile. "Of course not. How's it going?" Rachel, with her easygoing demeanor and infectious laugh, was a welcome distraction from the constant stress that plagued Ava. They chatted about school, their upcoming projects, and the latest rumors circulating through the halls. For a brief moment, Ava felt a sense of normalcy, a fleeting escape from the pressures of her life. As their conversation drifted, Rachel's tone grew more serious. "You know, Ava, You always seem so put together. But I've noticed you've been a bit off lately. Is everything okay?" Ava hesitated, her instinct to keep up appearances clashing with a desperate need to unburden herself. She took a deep breath, deciding to confide in Rachel. "Actually, it's been really tough," she admitted. "Ever since the accident, I've been struggling with a lot of guilt. And the pressure from school, my parents, it's just too much sometimes." Rachel's eyes softened with understanding. "I'm sorry you're going through that. If you ever need to talk, I'm here for you." Ava nodded, grateful for the offer. "Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate it." For the next few days, Ava found solace in Rachel's company. They shared more conversations, and Ava felt a sense of relief in confiding her struggles. It was a fragile bond, but it gave her a glimmer of hope that she wasn't entirely alone, but Ava's hope was soon shattered. One morning, as she walked through the school's main hallway, she noticed students whispering and glancing her way. The air was thick with the unmistakable scent of gossip. Her heart raced, a sense of dread settling in her stomach. As she reached her locker, she spotted Rachel in the crowd, her expression a mix of guilt and avoidance. Ava's hands trembled as she opened her locker, her mind racing with questions. She fumbled with her books, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease. It wasn't until lunch that Ava discovered the extent of the betrayal. A group of girls sat at a nearby table, their voices low but unmistakable. "Did you hear about Ava?" one of them said. "Rachel told me she's been a wreck since the accident. Apparently, she's barely holding it together." Ava's blood ran cold. Rachel had shared her confidences, her deepest fears and vulnerabilities, with others. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, a sharp pain that cut through her like a knife. She felt exposed, her private struggles now fodder for school gossip. Confronting Rachel was inevitable. After school, Ava found her by the lockers, her anger barely contained. "Rachel," she began, her voice trembling. "I trusted you. How could you tell everyone about what I'm going through?" Rachel's eyes widened in surprise, a flush of guilt spreading across her cheeks. "Ava, I didn't mean for it to get out. I was just trying to help. Ava's voice rose, attracting curious glances from nearby students. "You betrayed me, Rachel. You took my trust and turned it into a spectacle for everyone to talk about." Rachel's expression crumpled, but Ava couldn't find any sympathy in her heart. She turned away, her vision blurred by tears. The betrayal felt like a physical blow, a wound that deepened the isolation she already felt. In the days that followed, Ava's trust in others eroded. The whispers and glances from her classmates became a constant reminder of Rachel's betrayal. Ava withdrew further into herself, putting up walls to protect against future hurt. The sense of loneliness intensified, and the weight of her guilt and pressure grew heavier. Her grades began to slip as the stress took its toll on her ability to concentrate. Teachers who once praised her diligence now expressed concern about her declining performance. "Is everything okay, Ava?" Mr. Thompson, her history teacher, asked during a parent-teacher conference. "You seem distracted lately." Ava forced a smile, masking the turmoil beneath. "I'm just dealing with a lot right now, but I'm trying my best." Her parents, too, noticed the change. Her mother's concern was palpable, though it was tinged with frustration. "You need to focus, Ava. You can't let this affect your future." Ava nodded, the pressure to meet their expectations crushing her spirit. The betrayal had left her feeling vulnerable, and the weight of her responsibilities only deepened her sense of inadequacy. Each day felt like an insurmountable challenge, a battle against her own fears and the expectations of those around her. The betrayal was a turning point, a fracture in Ava's carefully constructed facade. It exposed the fragility of her perfect image and deepened the cracks in her sense of self. As she navigated the aftermath, Ava realized that the pressure to succeed and the fear of failure had pushed her to a breaking point. The betrayal was a stark reminder that trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild, and the loneliness it left in its wake was a burden she would carry alone. The weeks following Rachel's betrayal were a blur of anxiety and isolation for Ava. She found herself increasingly detached from her classmates, the whispers and sidelong glances eroding her already fragile confidence. The sense of being watched and judged became a constant undercurrent in her daily life, a suffocating presence that she couldn't escape, but the worst was yet to come. The betrayal had opened the door to a new form of torment, one that Ava couldn't have anticipated. It started with a single post on an anonymous social media account. Ava's face, captured in an unflattering moment, was accompanied by mocking comments about her perceived perfection and recent struggles. "Looks like Little Miss Perfect isn't so perfect after all," read one of the captions. The post quickly gained traction, shared among students with a voracious appetite for gossip. Ava discovered the post when she checked her phone during a study session in the library. Her heart sank as she scrolled through the comments, each one more vicious than the last. The anonymity of the internet emboldened her classmates, and they tore into her with cruel abandon. The sense of betrayal she felt after Rachel's actions paled in comparison to the sheer brutality of the online attacks. She tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just a handful of petty comments. But the posts continued, each one more hurtful and invasive than the last. Anonymous accounts proliferated, each taking turns to dissect her every move, her appearance, her actions. It wasn't just her academic performance or her social life that was under scrutiny, it was her very being. Did you hear? Ava had a breakdown in the library last week. "Guess she's not handling the pressure too well," read one particularly cutting post. Accompanying the text was a photo of Ava, her face streaked with tears, taken by a classmate without her knowledge. The relentless barrage of cyberbullying pushed Ava further into isolation. She stopped checking her social media accounts, hoping to shield herself from the vitriol. But the damage had already been done. Her reputation, once that of the perfect student, was now marred by the cruel words and images spread online. At school, Ava could feel the stares of her classmates burning into her back. Conversations hushed when she walked by, and she could almost hear the whispers trailing behind her. The cafeteria, once a place where she could catch up with friends and enjoy a brief respite from her responsibilities, became a minefield of judgment and ridicule. One afternoon, as she navigated the crowded hallway between classes, Ava overheard a group of girls giggling near the lockers. "Did you see the latest post about Ava?" one of them said, her voice tinged with malicious delight. I can't believe she thought she could keep up that perfect act forever." Ava quickened her pace, her face burning with shame. The weight of the cyberbullying was unbearable, and she felt a crushing sense of helplessness. The anonymity of her tormentors meant she couldn't confront them or seek any form of justice. She was trapped, a target for their cruelty with no way to defend herself. The cyberbullying reached its peak when a particularly cruel meme went viral among the student body. It depicted Ava's face, distorted and exaggerated, alongside captions mocking her breakdowns and perceived weaknesses. The meme spread like wildfire, appearing on every student's phone and being shared in private messages and group chats. Ava's phone buzzed incessantly as notifications from classmates poured in, some expressing sympathy, others reveling in her humiliation. She stared at the screen in disbelief, her heart pounding. The image and the accompanying comments felt like a physical assault, each one a blow to her already fragile sense of self. That evening, Ava locked herself in her room, the curtains drawn tightly against the outside world. She sat on her bed, her knees drawn to her chest, and stared at her phone through tear-blurred eyes. The meme had shattered her last vestiges of self-esteem, leaving her feeling exposed and utterly alone. Her parents, concerned by her withdrawal and declining performance, tried to reach out. "Ava, we're worried about you," her mother said, her voice tinged with both concern and frustration. "You need to talk to us about what's going on." Ava shook her head, unable to find the words to explain the depth of her pain. "I'm fine," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I just need some time." The cyberbullying left Ava feeling disconnected from the world around her. She no longer trusted her classmates, and the idea of opening up to anyone, even her parents, seemed impossible. She felt like a ghost, drifting through her days with a sense of detachment and despair. Her grades continued to plummet, and she found it increasingly difficult to concentrate in class. The teachers who once praised her now looked at her with a mix of concern and disappointment. "Ava, you need to pull yourself together," Mr. Thompson said during a meeting after school. "You're capable of so much more than this." Ava nodded mechanically, but his words felt hollow. The cyberbullying had stripped away her confidence, leaving her a shadow of the driven, ambitious student she once was. She struggled to maintain the facade of normalcy, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to keep up appearances. As the weeks went by, the cyberbullying gradually subsided, but the damage had already been done. Ava's sense of self-worth had been shattered, and the isolation she felt was profound. The betrayal by Rachel, followed by the relentless online attacks, had pushed her to a breaking point. The cyberbullying was a harsh reminder of the cruelty that existed beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect world. It exposed the fragility of her image and the vulnerability that lay beneath. Ava's journey into darkness was far from over, and the wounds left by the cyberbullying would take much longer to heal. The relentless pressure and cyberbullying had taken a heavy toll on Ava, but there was another aspect of her torment that remained hidden from view, an unseen witness who could have made a difference but chose to remain silent. His name was Marcus Reynolds, a quiet and reserved student who often sat at the back of the classroom, unnoticed by most of his peers. He had a knack for blending into the background, observing the dynamics around him without getting involved. Marcus had always been a keen observer, but his tendency to remain on the sidelines had its own consequences. Marcus had seen the accident that had scarred Ava so deeply. He had been walking home from his part-time job at a nearby coffee shop when he witnessed the collision. The screech of tires, the shattering of glass, and the panicked screams still haunted his memory. He had watched in stunned silence as Ava and Emma were pulled from the wreckage, the scene etched into his mind that in the days that followed, Marcus struggled with the weight of what he had seen. He knew he should have come forward, offered his account of the accident, but the fear of becoming involved held him back. The incident had left Ava in a vulnerable state, and Marcus had chosen to stay silent, thinking it was not his place to interfere. As the months passed, Marcus continued to observe Ava from a distance. He noticed the changes in her demeanor, the way her once bright and confident presence had dimmed. He saw her struggling under the weight of academic pressure, her interactions with classmates becoming increasingly strained. And when the cyberbullying began, Marcus watched with a growing sense of guilt that he knew that his silence had contributed to Ava's isolation. The accident, the pressure, the betrayal, and now the cyberbullying, all of it was a chain of events that had pushed her to the brink. Marcus felt a gnawing sense of responsibility, but he didn't know how to reach out or make amends for his inaction. One afternoon, as Ava sat alone in the library, Marcus found himself drawn to her. He stood at a distance, his gaze fixed on her hunched figure, her shoulders slumped with the weight of her burdens. He wanted to say something, to offer some form of support, but the words caught in his throat. The fear of being rejected or misunderstood held him back, and he turned away, retreating into the safety of his own solitude. But Marcus's guilt grew with each passing day. He couldn't escape the feeling that he had let Ava down by remaining a passive observer. He replayed the moments in his mind, each instance where he could have spoken up or offered a kind word, but had chosen to remain silent. The opportunity to make a difference finally presented itself during a school assembly. The principal had called the meeting to address the recent surge in cyberbullying, a growing concern among the faculty and administration. Ava sat in the audience, her face a mask of indifference, while the principal spoke about the importance of empathy and intervention. Marcus sat a few rows behind her, his heart pounding. He knew this was his chance to step forward, to break the silence that had imprisoned him for so long. As the principal called for students to share their experiences and support one another, Marcus felt a surge of determination. He stood up, his legs trembling, and raised his hand. The principal nodded, and Marcus took a deep breath, his voice shaking as he began to speak. I've seen what cyberbullying can do to someone. It can destroy their confidence, their sense of self-worth. And I know because I've been a witness to it, and I did nothing to help. The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward Marcus. Ava glanced over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. I saw someone I care about being torn down by this, and I stayed silent because I was afraid. But I can't stay silent anymore. We need to stand up for each other, to be there for those who are suffering, even if it's hard. As he finished speaking, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The room erupted in applause, and the principal nodded approvingly. Ava's gaze softened, a flicker of something like gratitude in her eyes. Marcus had finally found the courage to speak up, to become more than just an unseen witness. After the assembly, Marcus approached Ava, his heart pounding in his chest. Ava, I'm sorry, he said, his voice earnest. I should have spoken up sooner. I saw what you were going through, and I didn't do anything. I'm really sorry." Ava looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. "Thank you, Marcus," she said quietly. "It means a lot that you spoke up. I felt so alone, and knowing that someone saw and cared, it helps." The conversation was a small step, but it marked a turning point for both of them. Marcus's decision to break his silence offered Ava a glimmer of hope, a reminder that she wasn't entirely alone in her struggle. It was a fragile connection, but it was a start. The unseen witness had finally come forward, and his courage to speak out became a beacon in the darkness that surrounded Ava. It was a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming pressure and isolation, the simple act of reaching out could make a profound difference. The aftermath of Marcus's intervention was a turning point for Ava. His courage to speak up had provided a brief respite from her isolation, but the road to healing was still fraught with challenges. Among them was a hidden aspect of her life that she had kept secret, the unrequited love that had deepened her sense of loneliness and rejection. Ava's feelings for Ethan had been a carefully guarded secret for as long as she could remember. Ethan Clarke was the quintessential golden boy, handsome, charismatic, and effortlessly popular. He excelled in sports, aced his classes, and had a natural ability to make everyone around him feel special. To Ava, he seemed unattainable, a beacon of perfection in her tumultuous world. Their paths crossed frequently, both being involved in numerous school activities. Ava admired Ethan from a distance, captivated by his easygoing nature and the way he navigated life with apparent ease. Despite their shared classes and activities, Ava never found the courage to reveal her feelings, fearing that her affection would be met with rejection or, worse, indifference. Ethan, oblivious to Ava's feelings, treated her with casual friendliness, the way he did with everyone. He would wave at her in the hallways, share the occasional joke during group projects, and flash his charming smile that sent her heart racing. For Ava, these small interactions were both a source of joy and a painful reminder of her unspoken affection. The reality of her unrequited love hit Ava hardest during the annual winter formal. The event was a highlight of the school calendar, a night of glamour and excitement that everyone eagerly anticipated. Ava, despite her ongoing struggles, decided to attend, hoping for a brief escape from her troubles. She spent hours preparing, selecting a dress that she hoped would make her feel beautiful and confident. As she arrived at the decorated gymnasium, the festive atmosphere was almost enough to lift her spirits. The room was filled with the sound of laughter, the shimmer of twinkling lights, and the buzz of animated conversations. Ava's heart skipped a beat when she saw Ethan across the room, looking effortlessly handsome in his suit. He was surrounded by friends, his infectious smile lighting up his face. Ava's gaze lingered on him, her chest tightening with a mix of longing and resignation. The evening progressed in a blur of music and dancing. Ava found herself caught up in the excitement, her worries momentarily forgotten. But her euphoria was short-lived. As the night drew to a close, she spotted Ethan on the dance floor, his arms wrapped around Jessica, one of the most popular girls in school. They swayed together, their bodies moving in perfect harmony, lost in each other's gaze. Ava's heart sank as she watched them. The sight of Ethan with Jessica was a painful reminder of the chasm between her fantasies and reality. Ethan's affection for Jessica was palpable, a stark contrast to the friendly but distant interactions he shared with Ava. The realization that her love was unreciprocated hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her feeling empty and defeated. Unable to bear the sight any longer, Ava slipped out of the gymnasium, her vision blurred by tears. She found refuge in a quiet corner of the school courtyard, the cold night air a sharp contrast to the warmth and noise of the dance. She wrapped her arms around herself, the weight of her unspoken love pressing heavily on her chest. Her solitude was interrupted by a soft voice. "Ava, are you okay?" She looked up to see Marcus, his expression filled with concern. He had followed her outside, sensing her distress. Ava wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. "I'm fine, Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just needed some air." Marcus didn't press her, instead sitting beside her in silence. His presence was a comforting reminder that she wasn't entirely alone. After a few moments, Ava found the courage to speak. "It's just, sometimes it feels like everything I want is out of reach. Like no matter how hard I try, I can't be what people expect or need me to be." Marcus listened, his gaze steady and empathetic. "You don't have to be perfect, Ava," he said gently. "You're already enough as you are. And it's okay to feel what you're feeling. You're not alone in this." Ava looked at him, gratitude mingling with her sadness. Marcus's words were a balm to her wounded heart, offering a glimpse of solace in her storm of emotions. They sat together in the quiet courtyard, the weight of unspoken love hanging between them but softened by the shared understanding that came from their silence. The winter formal became a bittersweet memory for Ava, a night that highlighted both the pain of her unrequited love and the comfort of a growing friendship. She knew that her feelings for Ethan would not easily fade, but she also realized that she didn't have to face her struggles alone. Marcus's support became a steady presence in her life, a reminder that even in her darkest moments, there were people who cared. Ava's journey through the labyrinth of her emotions was far from over. The unrequited love she harbored for Ethan was a wound that would take time to heal, but it also taught her the value of vulnerability and the importance of seeking connection in the face of isolation. As she navigated the complexities of her heart, Ava learned that strength could be found not just in enduring pain, but in allowing herself to lean on others and embrace the support they offered. Ava's struggle with unrequited love was compounded by the unintended consequences of an interaction with one of her teachers. Mr. Bennett, her English teacher, was known for his passionate lectures and dedication to his students. He had a reputation for being both demanding and supportive, pushing his students to achieve their best while offering guidance and encouragement. At the beginning of the school year, Mr. Bennett had taken an interest in Ava's writing. He praised her essays for their depth and insight, often using her work as examples in class. His encouragement was a bright spot in Ava's life, a validation of her talent and hard work. As her troubles mounted, Ava found solace in writing, pouring her emotions into her journal and class assignments. Mr. Bennett noticed the shift in her work, the themes of her essays becoming darker and more introspective. Concerned, he invited her to stay after class one day to discuss her recent assignments. "Ava, your writing has always been impressive, but I've noticed a change lately," Mr. Bennett said, his tone gentle but probing. "Your recent essays have a different tone, more personal and troubled." Is everything okay? Ava hesitated, unsure how to articulate her feelings. It's just been a rough few months, she said finally. I've been dealing with some things outside of school, and I guess it's coming through in my writing. Mr. Bennet nodded, his expression sympathetic. I understand that life can be challenging, and it's natural for those experiences to reflect in your work. But remember, you don't have to go through this alone. If you ever need to talk or need support, I'm here to help. Ava appreciated his concern, but she also felt a pang of anxiety. The idea of opening up about her struggles, even to a supportive teacher, was daunting. She thanked Mr. Bennet for his offer and assured him that she would be okay, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. In the weeks that followed, Mr. Bennet continued to check in with Ava, offering encouragement and support. However, his well-intentioned efforts inadvertently added to the pressure she felt. His high expectations, combined with her own perfectionist tendencies, created a sense of obligation to maintain her academic performance despite her emotional turmoil. The breaking point came during a major assignment, a personal narrative essay that Mr. Bennet had assigned to help students explore their own experiences. Ava struggled to write the essay, her mind a whirlwind of emotions that she couldn't neatly translate into words. The pressure to produce a meaningful and insightful piece of writing weighed heavily on her, exacerbating her anxiety. The night before the essay was due, Ava sat at her desk, staring at the blank page on her laptop. Her thoughts were scattered, her emotions raw and unfiltered. She had tried to start the essay multiple times, but each attempt felt inadequate, a pale reflection of the turmoil she was experiencing. The clock ticked steadily toward midnight, and Ava felt the weight of impending failure pressing down on her. In a moment of desperation, she closed her laptop and buried her face in her hands. The tears came unbidden, a release of the frustration and helplessness that had been building inside her. She felt trapped, caught between the expectations of her teacher, her parents, and herself. The once comforting act of writing had become a source of anxiety, a reminder of her inability to meet the standards she had set for herself. The next day, Ava handed in her essay, a hastily written piece that barely scratched the surface of her true feelings. Mr. Bennet read it, his brow furrowing as he took in the disjointed and incomplete narrative. He called her to his desk after class, concern etched in his features. "Ava, this isn't like you," he said gently, holding the essay in his hand. "I know you're capable of so much more. What's going on?" Ava's shoulders slumped, the weight of his expectations and her own self-criticism bearing down on her. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennet," she said, her voice trembling. "I just couldn't get it right. There's too much going on, and I couldn't focus." Mr. Bennet sighed, his expression softening. "I understand that you're dealing with a lot, and I don't want to add to your stress. But you need to know that it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to handle everything on your own." Ava nodded, though the words offered little comfort. She left the classroom feeling defeated, her mind a whirl of conflicting emotions. Mr. Bennet's concern was genuine, but it had also heightened her sense of inadequacy. She felt like she was failing not just herself, but the people who believed in her, and the burden of those expectations only deepened her despair. In the days that followed, Ava withdrew further into herself, her interactions with Mr. Bennet becoming increasingly strained. She avoided his gaze in class, her once passionate engagement in discussions reduced to a mechanical participation. The teacher who had once been a source of encouragement had become, unintentionally, a symbol of her own perceived failures. Ava's relationship with Mr. Bennet was a reminder of how even well-meaning support could sometimes add to the pressure faced by those struggling with internal battles. His attempts to help, though rooted in concern and empathy, had inadvertently intensified her sense of obligation and inadequacy. Ava learned that the path to healing was not always straightforward, and that finding balance between seeking support and managing expectations was a delicate and often challenging process. Through her experiences with Mr. Bennet, Ava began to understand the complexity of dealing with emotional struggles. She realized that while support was crucial, it was equally important to recognize and set boundaries for herself, to acknowledge her own limitations, and to seek help in a way that aligned with her needs and capabilities. As Ava continued to navigate the intricacies of her emotions and relationships, she grew more attuned to her own needs and the importance of self-compassion. She learned that healing was a journey, one that required patience, understanding, and the willingness to forgive herself for the moments when she fell short of her own expectations. In the end, her interactions with Mr. Bennet, though fraught with challenges, became a catalyst for her to explore new ways of coping and finding resilience in the face of adversity. Ava's struggles were more than a personal battle, they were a reflection of the broader issue of how society often turns a blind eye to those in need. Her experience with cyberbullying, academic pressure, and emotional turmoil was witnessed by many, yet few chose to intervene. The bystander effect, a psychological phenomenon where individuals are less likely to offer help to a victim when other people are present, played a significant role in her isolation. The incident in the cafeteria was a stark illustration of this effect. Ava had been subjected to relentless taunts online, but when those taunts spilled into her everyday life, the reality of her situation became undeniable. One afternoon, as she walked into the cafeteria, a group of students at a nearby table began to whisper and snicker as she passed. Ava's heart sank, the familiar dread of being the subject of ridicule tightening in her chest. As she approached the food line, a cruel prank awaited her. Someone had posted a printed copy of a particularly vicious comment about her appearance on the bulletin board. The comment, originally posted on an anonymous social media account, had been upvoted and shared widely among her classmates. Ava stared at the paper, her face flushing with embarrassment and anger. The cafeteria, usually buzzing with conversation and laughter, seemed to fall silent. Ava could feel the eyes of her peers on her, their gazes a mix of curiosity and amusement. She scanned the room, hoping to find a sympathetic face, but saw only indifference or, worse, enjoyment of her humiliation. Ava's friends, who usually sat with her, were conspicuously absent. They had chosen to sit at another table, their avoidance a clear message that they wanted no part in the drama unfolding around her. Ava felt a wave of betrayal and loneliness, the sting of being abandoned by those she considered her closest allies. As she turned to leave, her tray still empty, she bumped into Emily, a quiet girl from her math class. Emily's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, Ava saw a flicker of empathy in her gaze. But Emily quickly looked away, muttering a hasty apology before scurrying off to join her friends. The sense of isolation was overwhelming. Ava walked out of the cafeteria, her appetite lost, and found a secluded spot outside where she could be alone. The tears came quickly, a release of the frustration and hurt that had been building inside her. She felt invisible, as if her pain was a spectacle for others to watch but not to address. The incident was a painful reminder of the bystander effect in action. Dozens of students had witnessed her humiliation, but none had stepped forward to offer support or challenge the bullies. Ava felt like she was drowning in a sea of indifference, her cries for help lost in the noise of daily life. In the days that followed, Ava's sense of betrayal deepened. She began to question the value of her friendships and the integrity of those around her. How could they stand by and watch her suffer without doing anything to help? The more she pondered this, the more she realized that the bystander effect was not just about the actions of others but also about the underlying culture of apathy that allowed such behavior to thrive. Determined to make a change, Ava decided to take a stand against the silence that had contributed to her misery. She approached the school counselor, Ms. Rodriguez, and requested a meeting to discuss the issue of bullying in the bystander effect. Ms. Rodriguez, a compassionate and proactive advocate for student well-being, listened intently as Ava recounted her experiences. "Ava, I'm so sorry that you've had to go through this," Ms. Rodriguez said, her eyes filled with empathy. "It's incredibly brave of you to come forward and speak about it. We need more voices like yours to address these issues and create a supportive environment for everyone." Together, they developed a plan to raise awareness about the bystander effect and the importance of standing up for those in need. Ava proposed organizing a series of workshops and assemblies focused on empathy, intervention, and the impact of bullying. She wanted to create a space where students could share their experiences, learn how to support each other, and understand the power of their actions. The initiative, called Stand Up, Speak Out, gained traction quickly. With the support of Ms. Rodriguez and the administration, Ava began organizing events and gathering volunteers. Posters appeared around the school, promoting the upcoming workshops and inviting students to participate. Ava felt a renewed sense of purpose, channeling her pain into a constructive effort to create positive change. The first workshop was a turning point for Ava and her peers. Held in the school auditorium, it attracted a diverse group of students, including those who had previously stood by and watched as Ava was bullied. The session began with a powerful video presentation that highlighted the effects of bullying and the bystander effect, followed by a discussion led by Ms. Rodriguez and Ava. Ava stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding as she prepared to share her story. She took a deep breath and began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've been on the receiving end of bullying and felt the sting of being ignored by those around me. It's one of the hardest things I've ever faced, but I'm here today because I believe we can change that. We can create a community where people look out for each other, where we don't turn away when someone is hurting." As she spoke, Ava saw the impact her words had on her audience. Faces that had once been indifferent now showed signs of understanding and empathy. Students began to share their own experiences, revealing how they had either been victims of bullying or had witnessed it and felt powerless to intervene. The discussions were raw and honest, exposing the vulnerabilities and fears that many students carried with them. Ava's courage to speak out inspired others to do the same, and by the end of the workshop, a sense of solidarity had begun to form among the participants. The success of the first workshop led to a series of follow-up sessions, each one building on the momentum of the previous. Ava's initiative became a catalyst for change, challenging the culture of silence and apathy that had allowed bullying to persist. Students who had once been passive bystanders began to take action, standing up for their peers and fostering a more inclusive and supportive environment. For Ava, the experience was transformative. She discovered a strength within herself that she hadn't known existed, a resilience that came from turning her pain into a force for good. The bystander effect, once a source of her isolation, became a powerful reminder of the impact that individuals could have when they chose to act with courage and compassion. As the Stand Up, Speak Out initiative continued to grow, Ava felt a renewed sense of hope and purpose. She realized that even in the face of adversity, there was always the potential for positive change. By breaking the silence and encouraging others to do the same, she had helped to create a community where empathy and support were valued over indifference and passivity. The journey was far from over, but Ava knew that she was no longer alone. She had found her voice and used it to make a difference, and in doing so, had forged connections that would help her navigate the challenges ahead. The bystander effect, once a symbol of her isolation, had been transformed into a testament to the power of collective action and the importance of standing up for one another. The Stand Up, Speak Out initiative had brought Ava a sense of purpose and a growing network of allies, but her journey was still fraught with personal challenges. One of the most poignant moments in her struggle came from a missed opportunity, an encounter that, if handled differently, might have altered the course of her life. During the final months of the school year, Ava attended a regional debate competition, a prestigious event that brought together students from various schools to showcase their skills. Ava, a member of her school's debate team, had been looking forward to the competition for weeks. It was a chance to prove her abilities, to stand out in a positive way amidst the chaos of her personal life. The competition was held at a nearby university, the campus bustling with students and coaches. The atmosphere was charged with excitement and nervous energy as teams prepared for their rounds. Ava, dressed in her formal debate attire, felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. She had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, and the weight of her expectations pressed heavily on her shoulders. Ava's debate partner, Ryan, was a confident and articulate speaker. They had worked well together throughout the year, their contrasting styles complementing each other. Ryan's charismatic delivery paired with Ava's meticulous research and analytical skills made them a formidable team. Their first round went smoothly, their arguments well received by the judges. Ava felt a surge of confidence as they advanced to the next round, her earlier nerves giving way to a sense of accomplishment. During a break between rounds, Ava and Ryan found a quiet spot on the campus lawn to review their notes and discuss their strategy for the upcoming debate. As they sat together, Ava noticed a familiar figure approaching, a young woman with an air of authority and a warm smile. It was Dr. Olivia Parker, a professor from the university's communications department and a well-respected figure in the debate community. Ava had heard of Dr. Parker's work and admired her contributions to the field of rhetoric and public speaking. Dr. Parker stopped by their table, her eyes twinkling with interest. "Hello, I'm Dr. Parker. I've been observing the debates today, and I wanted to commend you both on your performance. You have a remarkable dynamic as a team." Ava's heart skipped a beat, a mixture of pride and excitement flooding her senses. She introduced herself and Ryan, her voice tinged with awe. Thank you, Dr. Parker. It's an honor to hear that from someone like you. We've been working hard to prepare for this competition. Dr. Parker smiled, her gaze focused on Ava. I could tell. Your analysis was particularly insightful, Ava. You have a keen understanding of the issues and a natural ability to articulate your points effectively. Have you considered pursuing a career in communications or debate? Ava felt a rush of validation, her cheeks flushing with pleasure. I've thought about it, she admitted. I love debating and analyzing arguments, but I'm not sure what the future holds yet. Dr. Parker's expression grew thoughtful. If you're interested, I'd be happy to discuss potential opportunities with you. My department offers scholarships and internships for promising students, and I think you'd be a great fit. Here's my card. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to explore this further. Ava accepted the card, her fingers trembling slightly. Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. I'll definitely think about it. Dr. Parker nodded, her smile warm and encouraging. I look forward to hearing from you. Good luck with the rest of the competition. As Dr. Parker walked away, Ava felt a surge of excitement and possibility. The opportunity to work with someone she admired, to potentially secure a scholarship or internship, was a dream come true. She tucked the card into her notebook, her mind racing with the potential paths this encounter could open for her. However, as the day progressed, Ava's excitement began to wane, replaced by a creeping sense of doubt. The pressures and uncertainties of her personal life loomed large, casting a shadow over the potential opportunity. She questioned her ability to balance new responsibilities with the ongoing challenges she faced. The fear of failing or not living up to expectations gnawed at her confidence. The final round of the competition was intense, the opposing team presenting strong arguments that tested Ava and Ryan's abilities. Despite their best efforts, they narrowly lost the round, finishing in second place. Ava's initial disappointment was compounded by the nagging doubts that had been building throughout the day. In the days following the competition, Ava found herself hesitating to contact Dr. Parker. The card remained tucked in her notebook, a symbol of a possibility that she wasn't sure she could pursue. Each time she considered reaching out, the weight of her insecurities and the demands of her current situation held her back. She feared that taking on new challenges would only add to her stress and that she would ultimately fail to meet the expectations placed upon her. Weeks turned into months, and the opportunity to connect with Dr. Parker faded into the background of Ava's life. The missed chance became a source of regret, reminder of the moments when fear and doubt had prevented her from seizing an opportunity that could have opened new doors for her. She wondered what might have happened if she had taken the leap, if she had allowed herself to embrace the potential for growth and change. Despite the regret, Ava's encounter with Dr. Parker served as a lesson in resilience and the importance of overcoming self-doubt. She realized that missed opportunities were a part of life, but they didn't define her potential for success. The experience taught her the value of taking risks and the need to push beyond her comfort zone, even when the future seemed uncertain. Ava's journey continued, shaped by the challenges she faced and the lessons she learned along the way. The missed opportunity with Dr. Parker became a reminder of her capacity for growth and the importance of believing in herself, even when the path ahead seemed daunting. She vowed to seize future opportunities with courage and determination, knowing that each step forward brought her closer to the person she aspired to be. The memory of the missed opportunity lingered in Ava's mind, a poignant reminder of the fragility of potential and the impact of hesitation. However, it wasn't long before another experience tested her trust and added to her growing sense of disillusionment. This time, it came in the form of a broken promise from someone she had counted on. Throughout her struggles, Ava had maintained a close relationship with her older brother, Daniel. Daniel had always been a source of support and understanding, his easygoing demeanor and protective nature providing a sense of stability in her turbulent life. Despite the pressures of his own studies at college, Daniel made a point to check in on Ava regularly, offering advice and encouragement whenever she needed it. Ava cherished their late-night phone calls, their conversations a mix of playful banter and heartfelt discussions. Daniel had a way of making her feel heard and valued, his presence a comforting anchor in her sea of uncertainties. Ava confided in him about her challenges at school, her feelings of isolation, and her fears about the future. Daniel listened with patience and empathy, his reassurances a balm to her troubled mind. As the end of the school year approached, Ava faced the daunting prospect of final exams and college applications. The pressure to perform well and secure her future weighed heavily on her, and she found herself struggling to balance her academic responsibilities with her emotional well-being. Daniel, aware of her anxiety, promised to come home for the weekend to help her prepare and offer moral support. "Don't worry, Ava," he had said during one of their phone calls. "I'll be there this weekend. We'll go over your study materials, and I'll help you with your applications. You're not in this alone." Ava clung to his promise, the prospect of his presence a beacon of hope amidst her growing stress. She spent the days leading up to the weekend meticulously organizing her notes and drafting her application essays, eager to make the most of Daniel's visit. However, on the morning of his expected arrival, Ava received a text message that shattered her anticipation. Daniel's message was brief, his tone apologetic but distant. "Hey Ava, something came up with my study group. I won't be able to make it this weekend. I'm really sorry. We'll catch up soon, okay?" Ava stared at her phone, her heart sinking as the words registered. She felt a rush of disappointment and betrayal, the broken promise a harsh reminder of the uncertainties that had become a recurring theme in her life. She tried to rationalize his absence, telling herself that Daniel had his own responsibilities and couldn't always prioritize her needs. But the sting of his broken promise lingered, deepening her sense of isolation. The weekend that followed was a blur of frustration and loneliness. Ava struggled to focus on her studies, her mind drifting to thoughts of Daniel and the comfort his presence would have provided. She felt a mix of anger and sadness, the disappointment of being let down by someone she trusted amplifying her feelings of abandonment. In the days that followed, Ava found it difficult to communicate with Daniel. Their phone calls became infrequent, their conversations strained by the unspoken tension between them. Ava's attempts to express her feelings were met with vague reassurances and apologies, but the trust that had once defined their relationship felt fractured. The broken promise became a turning point for Ava, a moment that forced her to confront the complexities of relying on others and the challenges of managing expectations. She realized that even the people she loved could falter, and that placing all her hopes on their promises could lead to disappointment. The experience taught her the importance of self-reliance and the need to find strength within herself. even when external support fell short. As Ava navigated the final weeks of the school year, she learned to balance her reliance on others with a renewed sense of independence. She reached out to her friends and teachers for support, but also began to trust in her own abilities and resilience. The broken promise from Daniel, though painful, became a catalyst for her growth, pushing her to develop a stronger sense of self and a greater capacity to handle challenges on her own time. Ava and Daniel began to rebuild their relationship, acknowledging the misunderstandings and disappointments that had strained their bond. Their conversations became more honest, their interactions marked by a deeper understanding of each other's limitations and strengths. Ava learned to appreciate the moments of support they shared, while also recognizing the importance of cultivating her own resilience. The broken promise became a lesson in forgiveness and the complexity of human relationships. Ava understood that trust and support were vital, but so was the ability to adapt and grow in the face of uncertainty. She emerged from the experience with a renewed sense of purpose and a stronger belief in her ability to navigate the challenges of her life, knowing that even in the face of disappointment, she had the strength to persevere and thrive. The end of the school year brought a whirlwind of activity and emotion for Ava. With final exams and college applications looming, the pressure to excel was overwhelming. The expectations placed upon her, both by herself and by others, felt like an ever-present weight, threatening to crush her under their intensity. Among the many challenges she faced, the unrealistic expectations of society and her own perfectionism stood out as particularly insidious forces that exacerbated her struggles. From a young age, Ava had been taught to strive for excellence in all areas of her life. Her parents, both successful professionals, had instilled in her the importance of hard work and achievement. They celebrated her academic successes, encouraged her involvement in extracurricular activities, and set high standards for her future. While their intentions were rooted in love and a desire for her to succeed, the pressure to meet these expectations often left Ava feeling inadequate and overwhelmed. Ava's own perfectionist tendencies further compounded the issue. She prided herself on her ability to excel in academics, debate, and various school activities. Her identity was closely tied to her achievements, and any failure or setback felt like a direct reflection of her worth. The fear of disappointing her parents, teachers, and even herself created a constant undercurrent of anxiety that affected every aspect of her life. As the deadline for college applications approached, Ava's stress levels reached an all-time high. She spent countless hours poring over her essays, revising her application materials, and second-guessing her choices. The pressure to present herself as the ideal candidate, to meet the expectations of prestigious universities, and to secure a bright future was overwhelming. One evening, as Ava sat at her desk, surrounded by application forms and drafts of her essays, she felt a sense of despair wash over her. She had been working tirelessly, sacrificing sleep and personal time to perfect her applications, yet she still felt that it wasn't enough. The fear of failure gnawed at her, the thought of not meeting the expectations she had set for herself a constant source of dread. Ava's parents, aware of her dedication and the long hours she was putting in, tried to offer support in their own way. They often checked in on her progress, asking about her applications and offering advice based on their own experiences. However, their well-meaning inquiries sometimes added to her stress, their questions a reminder of the high stakes involved. One evening, as Ava worked on her application essays, her mother knocked on the door and entered her room. Mrs. Collins, a successful lawyer with a keen eye for detail, had always been a guiding force in Ava's life. Her expectations were high, but so was her belief in Ava's potential. "How's it going, sweetheart?" Mrs. Collins asked, her voice tinged with concern. Ava looked up from her laptop, her eyes tired and weary. "I'm just trying to finalize my essays. It's a lot to handle, and I'm not sure if they're good enough." Mrs. Collins sat down beside her, her expression softening. "You've worked so hard, Ava. I'm sure your essays are excellent. Just remember, it's important to be true to yourself and show them who you really are." Ava nodded, though her mother's words offered little comfort. The pressure to present herself as the perfect candidate, to meet the expectations of her parents and the admissions committees, felt like an insurmountable challenge. She wanted to make her parents proud, to live up to the standards they had set, but the fear of falling short loomed large. As the evening wore on, Ava's sense of anxiety grew. She found herself obsessing over every detail of her essays, revising sentences and second-guessing her choices. The pursuit of perfection became an all-consuming task, leaving her exhausted and emotionally drained. In a moment of frustration, Ava pushed her laptop aside and buried her face in her hands. The weight of the unrealistic expectations she had placed on herself, combined with the pressure from her parents and society, felt unbearable. She wondered if she would ever be able to meet the standards set for her, or if she was destined to fall short of the ideal she had been striving to achieve. The unrealistic expectations became a central theme in Ava's reflections. She realized that the pursuit of perfection was a double-edged sword, driving her to excel but also leading to a cycle of self-doubt and anxiety. She began to question the validity of the standards she had internalized, wondering if they truly reflected her own values and aspirations, or if they were a product of societal pressures and external expectations. In her quest to find balance, Ava sought the guidance of Ms. Rodriguez, the school counselor who had supported her through previous challenges. During their sessions, Ava opened up about the pressure she felt and the toll it was taking on her well-being. "Ava, it's important to recognize that perfection is an unattainable goal," Ms. Rodriguez said gently. "The standards you've set for yourself are incredibly high, and while striving for excellence is commendable, it's also essential to give yourself grace and acknowledge your limitations. Your worth is not defined by your achievements alone." Ava nodded, the counselor's words resonating deeply. She realized that the unrealistic expectations she had internalized were not only detrimental to her mental health but also hindered her ability to appreciate her own accomplishments. She began to explore the idea of self-compassion, learning to accept her imperfections and celebrate her strengths without the constant pressure to be perfect. The journey to balance was not easy, but Ava found solace in the understanding that she could redefine her own expectations. She focused on setting realistic goals, prioritizing her well-being, and seeking joy in her passions rather than constantly striving for external validation. The process required patience and self-reflection, but Ava gradually learned to embrace her true self, imperfections, and all. As Ava approached the final stages of her college applications, she did so with a renewed sense of purpose and self-awareness. She realized that her worth was not solely determined by her academic achievements or the approval of others, but by her resilience, integrity, and the ability to grow from her experiences. The unrealistic expectations, once a source of anxiety and self-doubt, became a catalyst for her journey toward self-acceptance and personal fulfillment. Ava's story continued to unfold, shaped by the lessons she learned and the challenges she faced. The journey to balance and self-compassion was ongoing, but she knew that she had the strength and determination to navigate the complexities of her life with grace and resilience. The unrealistic expectations, though a formidable obstacle, had ultimately led her to a deeper understanding of herself and the power of embracing her own unique path. As Ava navigated the complexities of her final year of high school, she encountered yet another obstacle that tested her resilience: the stark realization of the lack of resources available to support students like her who struggled with mental health issues. Throughout her journey, Ava had relied on her inner strength and occasional support from trusted individuals like Ms. Rodriguez, the school counselor. However, as demands intensified and her challenges grew more pronounced, Ava began to feel the limitations of the resources available within her school and community. The counseling center, while well-intentioned, was often overwhelmed with cases, leaving Ava with limited opportunities for consistent support. Appointment availability was sparse, and group therapy sessions were often filled to capacity. The demand for mental health resources outstripped the supply, a reflection of broader societal challenges in addressing adolescent mental health. Ava's own experiences with seeking help highlighted the systemic barriers that hindered access to adequate support. She witnessed peers struggling with similar issues who faced long wait times for counseling appointments or were turned away due to lack of availability. The stigma surrounding mental health also persisted, discouraging some students from seeking help altogether. In moments of despair, Ava found herself questioning why more wasn't being done to prioritize mental health resources in schools. She recognized the efforts of dedicated counselors like Ms. Rodriguez but lamented the systemic challenges that prevented more comprehensive support from being available to students in need. The realization of the lack of resources fueled Ava's determination to advocate for change. She became involved in student-led initiatives aimed at raising awareness about mental health issues and advocating for increased funding and support for counseling services. Ava spoke openly about her own struggles, hoping to destigmatize conversations around mental health and encourage others to seek help without shame or hesitation. Her efforts were met with mixed reactions. Some students and faculty embraced her advocacy, recognizing the importance of addressing mental health issues proactively. Others remained skeptical or resistant to change, citing budget constraints or competing priorities within the school community. Undeterred, Ava collaborated with like-minded peers to organize events such as mental health awareness weeks, guest speaker presentations, and peer support groups. She leveraged social media platforms to amplify their message, reaching a broader audience and sparking meaningful discussions about the need for accessible mental health resources. As Ava immersed herself in advocacy work, she found a sense of purpose and fulfillment in making a tangible difference in her community. She forged connections with fellow advocates and discovered a support network of individuals who shared her passion for promoting mental wellness. Despite the challenges and setbacks she encountered along the way, Ava remained steadfast in her commitment to advocating for change. She drew strength from her own experiences and the stories of those who courageously shared their struggles with mental health. The journey to address the lack of resources was ongoing and complex, but Ava's determination to create a more supportive environment for future generations of students drove her forward. She recognized that systemic change required perseverance, collaboration, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about mental health stigma and resource limitations. As Ava approached the end of her high school career, she reflected on the impact of her advocacy efforts. While she knew that much work remained to be done, she took pride in knowing that her voice had contributed to a broader conversation about the importance of prioritizing mental health in schools. The lack of resources had been a formidable challenge, but Ava's resilience and determination had transformed it into a catalyst for meaningful change. She remained hopeful that her advocacy efforts would continue to resonate and inspire others to join the movement toward a more supportive and inclusive approach to mental health in education. As Ava neared the end of her high school journey, she faced an unforeseen event that would test her resilience in ways she had never imagined. It was a sunny afternoon in late spring when news spread throughout the school like wildfire. Ava had disappeared. Rumors swirled as students and faculty struggled to make sense of Ava's sudden absence. Some speculated that academic pressure or personal challenges had overwhelmed her, while others whispered about more sinister possibilities. The truth, however, was far more complex and deeply personal. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Ava had grappled with mounting stress and uncertainty about her future. The pressures of final exams, college decisions, and her ongoing advocacy work for mental health had taken a toll on her emotional well-being. Despite her outward strength and determination, Ava had reached a breaking point. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, Ava found herself standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean, a place she often retreated to for solace and reflection. The crashing waves below seemed to echo the turmoil within her, a swirling maelstrom of fear, doubt, and unresolved emotions. In a moment of overwhelming despair, Ava made a decision that would change the course of her life. She stepped closer to the edge, feeling the pull of the abyss below. Thoughts raced through her mind, of missed opportunities, unmet expectations, and the relentless pressure to succeed. Tears streamed down her face as she grappled with the weight of it all. Just as Ava contemplated taking a step forward, a voice broke through the silence behind her. "Ava, stop!" Startled, Ava turned to see Ms. Rodriguez standing a few feet away, her expression a mix of concern and urgency. The counselor had been alerted to Ava's disappearance and had followed her to the cliffside, driven by a gut feeling that something was wrong. "Ava, please," Ms. Rodriguez pleaded, her voice gentle but firm. "Whatever you're going through, you don't have to face it alone. Let me help you." Ava hesitated, torn between the allure of escape and the lifeline offered by Ms. Rodriguez's presence. The counselor took a cautious step forward, extending a hand toward Ava with unwavering compassion. "You're not alone, Ava," Ms. Rodriguez continued softly. "There are people who care about you, who want to support you through this. Please, let me help you find a way through." Tears continued to fall as Ava looked into Ms. Rodriguez's eyes filled with understanding and genuine concern. In that moment, something shifted within Ava, a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness that had threatened to consume her. With trembling hands, Ava reached out and grasped Ms. Rodriguez's hand tightly. The counselor pulled her into a comforting embrace, holding her close as they stood together on the edge of the cliff. The weight of Ava's despair began to lift, replaced by a sense of relief and the knowledge that she was not alone in her struggles. In the days that followed, Ava received the support she needed to navigate her mental health challenges. She sought professional counseling and leaned on the unwavering support of her family, friends, and community. Slowly but surely, she began to rebuild her strength and resilience, one small step at a time. The experience of facing her darkest moment and emerging with renewed determination shaped Ava's perspective in profound ways. She recognized the importance of reaching out for help and advocating for mental health awareness and resources. Her own journey became a testament to the power of resilience and the transformative impact of support and compassion. As Ava prepared to embark on the next chapter of her life, one marked by healing, growth, and continued advocacy, she carried with her a deep gratitude for those who had stood by her side during her darkest hour. The road ahead was uncertain, but Ava faced it with courage and a newfound sense of purpose, knowing that she had the strength to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead.